Defence reforms in India have been in the news for almost a decade now, since nearly 2015-2016, when the current Prime Minister Modi government decided to initiate reforms in defence industry in India. There have been number of steps that have been taken by the government, and the industry has responded vigorously to that. But where are the reforms right now, and what needs to be done going forward in terms of reforming legacy institutions like the Defence Research and Development Organization, the DGQA? All that needs to be discussed, and that's the topic of this discussion with Lieutenant General Subrata Saha, my guest today, former Deputy Chief of the Indian Army, also a man known to have initiated several reforms within the military as well as outside after his superannuation, and someone who was closely associated with the development and progress of the Indian defence industry. So welcome to this program, General Saha.
Thank you.
Let me start with what you started in the Indian Army when you were serving there. You started with an organization called the Army Design Bureau, the ADB, which has now become synonymous with single point contact between the Indian Army and the industry, innovators and the inventors, if I may say so. So, first of all, what made you start that? Of course, what was the idea behind it? And then we'll come to our main topic of what should be done for the next step of reforms or next generation of reforms for Indian defence industry.
So, thank you, Nitin, for this opportunity to do this recall. You see, we had, I came here as Deputy Chief after 15 Corps, and that is one place where, since you're perpetually in operations, at least in those days, the dependence on import would hurt you. So, soon after I took over, I got the okay from the Chief, and we went on an unprecedented outreach. Every weekend with 6 brigadiers, we used to go out to different corners of this country, all academic industry hubs, reaching out to them, telling them that this is what we require in the next 15 years. And that's how that, kind of movement of large scale movement of MSMEs into the defense sector started. And then once we had progressed a little bit, we realized that there is a requirement to institutionalize this process. So then came the idea to, why not create the Army Design Bureau? There were some thoughts on that in the past, but it never quite took off. So we just picked up this thing to institutionalize the process because, like you mentioned, single point contact, not only for industry, for DRDO, for startups, for academic institutions, for field formations, what they want. And we also took into our fold the simulator, design division, Secunderabad. So an element of, repository of information and an element of design put together, we created the Army Design Bureau. And thanks to Mr. Parikar, it got his approval on 31st August 2016 and it was launched. So now, as you mentioned, it is actually very heartening to see the kind of, enormity of things that they are doing, and most importantly, a very responsible role that they are playing for the Army towards Indianization.
Absolutely, technology absorption otherwise. Later, after your retirement, you also became the member of the National Security Advisory Board, and there one of the important works that you did, part of the reforms process, was the corporatization of the Ordnance Factory Board, or OFB. How was that process and how was that managed?
Well, that was actually a proposal that I had given as member of the NSAB that we need to take up this, and which was sort of picked up by the NSA, and he gave us the approval. So basis that we commenced the study, and what we focused on was we studied 4 previous committees that had tried to address the same subject, and we just picked up those 15-16 points on which they could not be implemented. Okay. And we targeted those 15-16 points, and that is what ultimately you saw. It required a little bit of, shall we say, empathy with the shop floor and a little bit of understanding of the highest leadership, as it were, of the Ordnance Factory, to see how to bring in the reform as smoothly as possible. Well, it has moved quite successfully, I should think. Has it achieved 100%? Obviously not yet. It is a work in progress, and I dare say there are miles to go. But you can see the change happening. I mean, if you see the kind of exports, for example, that are erstwhile ordnance factories and the new defense public sector units are doing, it is very encouraging, and I think they are on the right track, and I would imagine it's a matter of time when they will flourish and start delivering.
I'm sure. The competition has meant, and the fact that they have to now stand on their feet, own feet, has meant that they are now much more agile, much more enterprising, if I may say so, and therefore it is all for their good. In any case, those 7 verticals that you created, that has come. We come to the next stage of reforms. One is, of course, the DGQA, the Director General of Quality Assurance, and the elephant in the room, if I may call it, the Defence Research and Development Organization. You were incidentally also a member of that committee which went into possibilities of reforms in DRDO. That aside, what are your views on what are the next steps to be taken for the next generation of reforms in defence, including DRDO and DGQA?
Okay, so let's stay with the DRDO first. See, to my mind, it is most important to realize that in 2022, when the Prime Minister had announced his vision of Viksit Bharat 2047, एक तरीके से उन्होंने actually he gave us the national mission.
Right.
He gave us the Rashtriya Uddesh, if you will. And if that is the national mission, the entire machinery has to move towards that. There are various estimates of what would be the size of the economy, and they are all hovering between 30 to 35 trillion dollars, right? Now, in order to strongly undergird the security of a 30 to 35 trillion dollar economy, you require a national security setup of that kind. And so, really speaking, that is of a reality, a mission which has to be achieved. Sure. On the other side is the changing character of war. If you see the entire thrust today, the primacy today of modernization of armed forces of the powers that are there, it is towards non-contact war, where you want to achieve your outcomes without having to get into a physical assault.
Sure.
Right? And if you can't achieve that, the least is you foreordain the result of an outcome like that. So that is why we come into things like, a space war, right, where you are trying to, get at kinetic, non-kinetic means to destroy the other person's space assets, whether they are ISR, whether they are communications, cyber, and not only military targets, non-military targets. Then in the electromagnetic space domain, we are seeing, targeting going on. We are hearing about hypersonics. We are hearing about autonomous systems, targeting our field defenses, other tactical and logistical set, and all of it put together, it is being used for information warfare. Sure. To get at the cognitive domain. Right. So if you see, this coming together, or shall we say, as we are going forward, in the correlation of forces that are at play in a war, the space and the power of the technology is increasing manifold. Sure. I, in fact, believe that today we are entering an era where it would be more of maneuver of technologies over maneuver of forces. Right. That will give you the results. Absolutely. So now the thing is, for this kind of warfare that we are looking at, and for the kind of targeting that we are looking at of military civilian targets, clearly DRDO has to reform itself.
Move with times.
Move with the times. In fact, they started with a mandate of import substitution. Of course, they have gone well past that mandate, but now they have to reach the next level to be able to provide the leadership in these technologies. I think so. At a very macro level, DRDO's reforms, in fact, the broader national security architecture's reforms have to be directed towards the national mission, that is Viksit Bharat 2047.
That's right. So, DRDO has been there for quite some time, almost 6 decades, and it's got now sort of almost spread into almost all segments of military and non-military technologies. Some of them were required, say, 20 years ago, but no longer valid or relevant today. How do they change the character of their own research and own, I would say, mandate to match lockstep with the military's requirement now, especially the Indian military's requirement?
Yeah, see, Nitin, now, as I said, the changing character of war. Right. B, I think it is important to appreciate the fact that DRDO has done a lot.
Right.
When it comes to the strategic systems, they have done a great job.
Very good. The missile systems.
Absolutely. Strategic
good.
systems,
Yes.
all of them, I think they have done a great job. Even in the conventional weapons, if you look at the weapon locating radar, Swati, if you look at the advanced towed arty gun system, if you look at that, if you look at the Akash system, if you look at their contribution in the Netra, the airborne early warning, and torpedoes, then sonars, and then even their contribution to the projects like Dhruv, the LH, the Prachanda, the attack helicopter, then Tejas.
LCA,
So there is a lot of contribution which is there. Having said that, we also must appreciate that if we take into consideration the intellect that resides in the DRDO, the infrastructure which is there in the DRDO, the investment which is there in the DRDO, are we able to leverage it optimally? I think that is something which needed to be addressed. Now, why is it not being leveraged optimally? See, at the end of the day, to be able to lead in technologies, as I look at it, we must have a very clear role distinction and shared accountability between the scientist, the user, that is the armed forces, and the finance, that is financially supporting this. If you go by the current methods, the user, armed forces, I think, are involved only peripherally. It is not, right from inside. The second thing, as you can see, the finance, they're more, keen to see that the process is in place. Outcomes, they aren't really.
That's right. The lack of accountability there, I suppose.
So now, when you make the user peripheral and you make the process primary, obviously, what is happening? These process hurdles are taking away the appetite of a scientist to take risk. And if you want to be leading in technology, you have to take risk.
Absolutely.
So that environment has to change. And I'm not saying that it is not there. It is not so, because otherwise they wouldn't have succeeded. So my point is, right now, that scientific temper, it is there in small pockets. It is there in small pockets from where we are seeing the results. But there is also this tendency to go in for expediency. And how do you go in for expediency? By outsourcing work.
That's right.
And at the end of it, the leadership that we are expecting in technology is missing out because of, as I said, this essential requirement of a very clear role distinction and shared accountability between the scientist, the user, and the finance.
I think more coordination there and more, I would think, dialogue is required.
Absolutely.
What about the role of the private sector, which has now got an impetus, which is now, really vibrant, MSME sector, some of the larger defense companies, and you've dealt with them, you're dealing with them. And in fact, I forgot to mention that you also started the Society for Indian Defense Manufacturers after your superannuation. So clearly, you have a full, visibility on the sector. So what is the role of the private sector vis-a-vis DRDO, and what should DRDO do to do more involvement of the private sector?
You see, now we are it's a very interesting question that you're asking, because progressively today the private sector is quite capable of integrating systems. So actually DRDO can easily step back now, focus on technology development, and leave the product development to the industry. Unless you're dealing with a product which is not commercially viable, is fully understandable, then it comes back to DRDO. But as a broad principle, I think if you were to use this as a first principle, that product development, industry, technology development, DRDO, I think we would have hit it right. Okay. The other thing is, right now, if you are seeing, the DRDO is the deciding authority whether they will be taking the project forward or whether they will give it to the industry. At what stage are they going to give it? It's all there with the DRDO. It has got practical issues, it has got fundamental issues. Why am I saying fundamental issues? Because it is inherent, like if I am going to decide, obviously there is a tendency to take the project and then sublet it, or shall we say outsource it, use collaboration, whatever is the right thing, then go ahead with it. But at a more functional level, if you see, like for example, we are seeing some, like take the ATAGs for example. Between the two industries that are developing this, private sector industries, two major ones, there are differences in the product which is there.
Right.
So which is bound to have long-term sustenance issues. Similarly, if you see with the Pinaka, which is a slightly better than the ATAGs.
Right.
So anyway, coming back to the thing, so which with the point which I'm getting at is, there is a requirement of, a defense technology council,
Right.
which takes this call.
Which gives the direction.
Which takes this call, gives the direction that, okay, this project should be done by the DRDO, this project should be done by the industry, and we have the make route already available in the DAP, Defense Acquisition Procedure.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is, okay, if this has to be done by collaboration between industry, DRDO and also academia, it can be worked out. So basic fundamental being technology development should be with the DRDO, and they should be focusing now on real niche and critical technologies.
And research in them and innovation in that basically. Because after all, the asset has been created for such a long time.
It is a national strategic asset, and we should be focusing on how do we take it to the next level.
Absolutely. And I think this is what makes it clear to those who thought that DRDO is going to be dismantled, DRDO is going to be sort of made irrelevant. I don't think that is the case at all.
I think that debate is completely irrelevant. It is misinformed.
Right.
The whole discourse is to take DRDO to the next level.
Absolutely.
To the next level which supports the armed forces and the country really towards Viksit Bharat, and also to facilitate DRDO's place in the broader national defense R&D ecosystem.
Sure.
The current structure, the way it is, it is not really that
pulling its weight really,
leveraging the capability that lies outside.
Absolutely.
So that is another fundamental principle that needs correction.
I think that is where if we have to become self-reliant or Atmanirbhar in defense, which is an imperative as the wars currently raging have showed us, where you don't have ammunition if you don't produce it yourself. You don't have technology if you don't produce it yourself or develop it yourself. So therefore, DRDO has to now, like you said, has to go to the next level and work with all the stakeholders rather than keeping them out and just get them in whenever required. I think the user-driven approach is probably the best approach, and I suppose the committee has given the recommendations on those lines from what one hears, and hopefully those can be rolled out after the elections are over. We'll wait and watch what happens there. But you also interestingly mentioned the need for reforms in DGQA functioning. Explain that a little bit.
Okay, so as far as the DGQA is concerned, very recently they have introduced some reforms. With that change, as I look at it, DGQA, the industry phase of the DGQA has been simplified a lot.
I'll interrupt you here. If you can explain to the viewers what is the role of the DGQA so far?
So DGQA is, okay, like when a product is being manufactured, right, there is first stage of the quality control, which ensures that the product comes to a certain quality, right? And the second stage is the quality assurance.
Right.
So there is a first stage quality assurance by the manufacturer before he gives it out to you for use.
Right.
Okay. So now before he has given it out to you, he has assured himself that the quality assurance is fine.
Right.
Particularly with defense equipment, the second stage quality assurance becomes important, which should be driven by the user,
Right.
which should be driven by the agency that is acquiring it,
Right.
to be sure that you are getting a product which is 100% fail-safe.
Absolutely.
So, well, this does not apply to a car which you are purchasing because you are quite happy with the manufacturer's QA.
Right.
But when it comes to the defense products, because the way we have evolved,
You need second level of
you are doing a
assurance.
second level, and it is not as if we are not finding modern means to deal with that. We have heard of something like the green channels, where you are completely satisfied with the manufacturer, so you give him the green channel status. Anyway, so without getting into complications, so in the case of DGQA, the first set of reforms that we have seen is, which has been now sort of announced, is they have made the industry phase of the DGQA much more user-friendly, industry-friendly, trying to share their resources which are there, making it easy for the industry to use. They have reduced the the points of contact that the industry, so all of that, you know, has been taken care of. But there are other issues of the QA, I think, which needs attention. One, of course, you know, there is a fundamental conflict of interest that has been pointed out by several committees earlier also, that the manufacturer cannot be also doing the second stage of quality assurance.
Right.
It has to be done by the acquisition framework and the users.
Sure.
Acquisition framework because they are doing the procurement.
Right.
Users because for the rest of the life
they are going to use it.
Defect investigation, you know, inspections, all that.
Right.
So therefore, this is one which requires correction. And second thing, I think the kind of manpower that we are having in quality assurance, the age bracket is very high today. If you take DGQA, if you take DG Air Quality Assurance, it's very high. In the case of Navy, DGNAI, the naval DGNAI, he reports directly to the naval headquarters,
right.
and they have a separate cadre.
Correct.
Because they have a separate cadre, obviously it is the manpower state is relatively better off. But then in the case of the others, in terms of age bracket, after about 10 years, 15 years down the line, we will be ending up in voids if we don't start infusing, you know, younger generation. And equally, technologically qualifying the people to remain abreast with what is happening latest in the world, I think is important.
Right.
And to my mind, some sort of, you know, quality certification is also required.
Absolutely.
That is this quality assurance, you know, authority, is he qualified to do what he's doing?
Correct.
You know, so like
So periodic upgrades and periodic checks are required.
grades, and like you have a certificate that you are capable of carrying out this particular task. So I think that should be required.
That is where right now there's a lot of confusion about, you know, and the conflict of interest that you mentioned. So just for our viewers' sake, DGQA is controlled by the Department of Defense Production in the MOD.
Okay, so it's a pretty interesting mix. You know, like Army is almost 85% dependent on the, rather DGQA's 85% functions are meant for the Army.
Correct.
And there is another 15% of the DGQA which looks at two functions of the Navy also.
Right.
In the case of air, it is DGAQA, Air Quality Assurance.
Right.
They look at only indigenous product.
Okay.
For whatever the Air Force imports, they look after the quality assurance through a directorate in the Air Headquarters.
I see.
In the case of Navy, as I was mentioning a little while back, DGNAI reports to the Naval Headquarters, and two of their quality
Goes to the Army, DGQA.
DGQA. So this is another, you know, issue which needs to be streamlined. Like as I mentioned, whatever is stage 1 of quality assurance remains with the manufacturer, public or private, immaterial. And stage 2, which is to do with the acquisition, should shift to the acquisition framework, and as a continuation thereof, with the respective service for the rest of the life cycle sustenance.
Very valid point, and I think the next set of reforms, next generation reforms, if we want to call that, are due and overdue, I must say. So DRDO and DGQA to begin with, and then maybe ease of doing business, you know, more funds, technology development fund is already there. DRDO has been told to do 25% of its research funds to the private sector, and I think there's a host of other stuff, but the major big ticket reforms can be done, I think, on the lines of what you have just talked about. So I suppose we'll wait and watch what happens when the new government takes office, and for the sake of the Indian defense industry as well as the Indian defense forces, I think we need to have these reforms rolled out as soon as possible. But thank you very much for your insights, as usual. Very informative, very educational, and something that our viewers will cherish and learn from. So do keep watching Bharat Shakti, and of course keep sending your feedback. You know our social media handles, so your comments are welcome. And if you haven't subscribed to the Bharat Shakti YouTube channel, do subscribe and spread the word, spread the love. Thanks for being here.